All right. Have people had a good week and weekend?
We had a birthday for my son, so we were busy partying.
That does not sound like a bad thing to do. That's great. Happy
Yes,
birthday.
thank you.
I noticed I've been going through and changing due dates to spread things out more often. If you see that things are too stacked on top of each other, please email me and let me know. Because I'm trying to take care of that. I just don't want anybody feeling like they're overwhelmed. I have gone through, and there are several things that people have resubmitted, and I've taken care of that. And as far as I can tell, everything that's been turned in is graded, so we're all up to date. If you turn something in and it's not graded yet, please drop me an email. It's, I don't know if you guys, or any of you are having a similar issue. I will look at my university email and I'll have everything cleared out, refresh and all that. And then 2 hours later, I'll come back and there'll be 11 emails, and some of them with dates of previous days that supposedly I haven't opened. Are you guys having any issues with that at all? That happens about once a week for me. Anybody else have anything like that going on? Hey, Brittany. I don't know if it's just my system or what. It does seem that it happens a lot more often when they're doing system upgrades or when things change. Like I did notice that there's been a couple changes with how Teams is formatted, and I wonder if that's an issue. It shouldn't be, but so every chance you get, refresh uh, your interface with the class, and if there looks like anything is not up to date or a link is dead, please let me know, and we'll take care of it as soon as I'll take care of it as soon as I can. Uh, I did want to ask for or have people ask questions about stuff so far after a little bit, and we'll get to that in just a couple minutes. One is, does everybody understand that if you don't get the grade that you want out of something, if it's lower points than what you're hoping for, just look at the directions that I've given or the comments that I've made and go around and resubmit. Does everybody understand that? I think I've got to do that because we don't meet in person. Otherwise, we'd have twice a week where everybody could see what's going on and double check with me, but we just don't get that. So if there's any issues, like for example, uh, the background essays, sometimes there's an issue with that, or a person or somebody may not have followed the directions, and I'll just say, for more points, go back, review the assignment parameters, and make these changes, and everything will be just fine. The people that have done that, most people who do that, let me know, and I'm able to go back in and regrade everything as soon as possible. Yes, Polly.
Is there a due date for their resubmission?
I think that everything should be turned in, resubmitted, and finalized that last week of class. So the week before finals,
Mhm.
everything should be done and turned in.
So even if it's like an early assignment, but I can still turn it in up to the last week.
Yeah, I would try really hard not to wait. Do it as quick as and as soon as you can. But I will, especially like with quizzes and things like that just need a little bit of tweaking. I'm more than happy to go back through and rework the points. That doesn't bother me at all.
Thank you.
I will tell you a horror story. Spring semester last, no, it was fall semester in 23. Uh, a young lady in the class was her part of the semester she was living with her family. She was working on the sculpture. She was working on the texture tiles as well. And she came home from school and work one day to find that everything had been cleaned up. Her mother had decided to help out and clean up the mess that she had left in her room and threw away all of her artwork. And thankfully, she had been taking photos of the process as she was doing it, and she did the best she could. She was able to recover a lot, but the fact that she took progress or the process photos periodically as she was going along really saved her. Because that sounds like something, when you tell a professor something like that, it reads like a total excuse. The fact that she had taken photos every day of what she was doing made it so that everybody understood that um, she had been keeping up to date with her work. So another one, somebody was they were doing a semester abroad and they were taking this class. Uh, what was really cool is that they were able to keep up with most of the stuff, but threw things away before they should have, and so they missed out on the very last project. And they, when they got home, they were able to work on it and turn it in late. We adjusted their grade after they got home, but I would highly recommend do everything you can to document everything, so terrible things like that don't happen to your work. All right. Well, today it looks like most everybody has turned in their structure with skin, and we're ready to go on to the next thing. And this I wanted to talk about and show you some examples, good and bad, of previous classes, so so kind of drive home what we've been talking about with the biomorphic organic abstract form. On the structure with skin and the wire grading, if you didn't get full points, again, look at the notes that I made, make the adjustments you need to, and then turn it in. One of the frustrating things that I have as a teacher is that people will do absolutely wonderful things, but they don't get a lot of points because they don't fit the assignment. And that's really hard, but this isn't a class where you design it yourself. The assignments are there to cover specific things, and so they have to follow the assignment parameters. And so if you turn in one of your pieces and I don't give you the points that you deserve, look at the notes. And if you need to, I've had Zoom calls with people before to just go over so that they can understand why they didn't get the points that they thought they needed. And there have been a couple cases where we found out that the biggest problem was just they didn't include enough photos so that we could see all, what they have been doing with the entire sculpture. And so a lot of the times it's a relatively easy fix, and it may be that you'll need to go back and work on something for a couple more hours and still get the points that and that's the way, or the avenue to get the points that you need. All right, I wanted to share with you examples of good and bad stuff that people have turned in, go over the quiz and stuff like that. But before we do that, do you guys have any questions about things so far? All right, excellent. Okay, the first thing I want to do is we're going to quickly go over the quiz for this, and then we're going to launch into good and bad examples of the carving. So let me share with you my screen. All right. And we have it looks like 5 people here. So I'd like to go through, and I'd like everybody who can to respond. And if you can't get to your mic, or if your mic is not working, please respond by typing into the chat. All right. What is the difference between form and shape? Well, I'll ask this a different way. Which of these is two-dimensional? All right, Brittany. Oh, Aaron. Okay, Aaron says shape is 2D and form is 3D, and that's exactly right. For the purposes of this course, all the questions are related directly to the text. So if you look them up on Dr. Google, you're not going to always get the right answers. So please make sure that you reference the text. My wife likes using that term, Dr. Google, because she is a health and wellness expert. And I thought that was absolutely wonderful. To see people go into a doctor's office or an emergency room panicking because they found the one thing that validates all their worst fears, I think is pretty, it's sad on one hand, kind of funny on the other hand when they find out the reality. All right, what are the materials most often used in the subtraction process? And we're talking about through time. What do you think are the two most common materials that have been used? Yes, Brittany.
Wood and stone.
Yeah, yeah. At least everybody knows about wood carving, and with stone, the earliest things that are evidence of human beings manipulating their environment are examples of stone. In China, they found human-made tools that are 1.8 million years old. And there's evidence of worked stone architecture in South Africa. It's called Adam's Calendar, if any of you guys want to look it up. And the dates on that go anywhere from 150,000 to over 1 million years, just depending on how they date it. All right, now this question is really good. We talked about this last week, so it'll be a review. What is the difference? Well, what is non-objective or non-representational refer to? We are talking about abstraction, but are these abstractions that relate directly to the perceived world or not? And the answer there is right there with non-objective and non-representational. If it's non-objective, it doesn't have an object for the source. If it's non-representational, it's not supposed to replace anything. So these are things that don't look like trees. Now, since the organic or biomorphic abstraction that we're working with, I keep talking about basing it on plant forms or coral or bone forms, different things like that. Those are representational. They're abstract. They don't really exist in the real world, but they have their foundation in the perceived world. Non-representation or non-objective objects are things that are like when you're encapsulating sound or emotion, or when you're using letters or symbols, when you're trying to paint something that doesn't have a color or a shape or a form. That is not what we're working with. We are, for this carving that we're doing with the foam, we are working with things that even though they're abstract and don't have a one-to-one correlation with anything, it does begin with the actual physical world. Monolithic forms do not retain the closed form of the original material. Does anybody know if that is true or false? What does monolithic mean? If we break it down, lithic is stone, mono means one. Can anybody give an example of a monolithic sculpture or monolithic architecture?
Isn't Stonehenge in England a monolithic structure?
Yeah, absolutely. Monolithic means that it's an enclosed form. It's a single block. And you look at Stonehenge or nearby, there's the Astonbury henge. The sculptures that are in the middle of that henge is they're basically just blocks, like Lego blocks that don't have any hollows to them, and they're set on top of each other. So that's what monolithic is. Stylized works conform to a particular historical style or stress a design characteristic. Do you expect that to be true or false? Let's hear from Rihanna or Long.
It's true.
Yeah, I would definitely think so. When you're talking about stylization, you're talking about pushing things into a realm of a shared visual vocabulary, and that pretty much ties it directly to historical style or design. So yes, very good. To abstract something means to simplify it. Do you remember our conversation last week? Is this true or false?
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
I only hesitated on it being true because I was suddenly trying to think of a way to abstract something by making it more complicated.
There are a couple. Have you guys ever seen the 1970s illustrations and cover art for? It was a British publication of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I, if you look it up, there it was a pen and ink artist, and the texture that they did was with lots and lots and lots of little teeny lines and little teeny circles and stuff within the shapes. So, and I think that this is exactly what Rihanna is talking about. In that case, it was abstracted, but it was flabbergastingly, I don't know if that's a word, but you know what I'm saying, flabbergastingly more complicated. So I think that this question, to abstract something means to simplify it. The text says yes, absolutely. And that's going to be our answer. But Rihanna is absolutely right. Sometimes, you know, us weird artists will do something specifically going against everybody's expectations. But for the purpose of this quiz, the answer is yes, it's true. So yeah, that good observation, Rihanna. Now, softness of material does not equate to the ease of working. Who believes straight up that softness of material does equate? And among those people that do believe that, have you ever worked in any sort of food service industry where you have to deal with the ice cream machine? Because right there, you know that this is not true. Oh, what's interesting about that is we expect it to be true because it's a soft material. It should be easy to work, but that is not the case, and it's rarely the case. And hard materials are not always, that does not always equate to difficulty of working either. You know, it really depends on your facility with the material and how good your tools are.
Also, when you're working with a hard material, you can at least be pretty sure that once you've made a change to it, it'll stay like that. But with a soft material, you don't know. Gravity might get involved somehow.
Yeah, that is definitely true. I have any of you guys seen the uh, Close Encounters of the Third Kind? That movie way back from the 70s. Richard Dreyfuss gets zapped by an alien ray. They're trying to communicate with him, and he starts having visions of Devil's Tower in Wyoming. And he sculpts it at one point out of mashed potatoes, and he's getting really frustrated because the potatoes keep falling over to the side. So yeah, and that's, of course, when Rihanna mentions something like that, I have to go to the simplest example that I know, which is a 1978 movie with mashed potatoes. But yeah, absolutely.
I haven't seen the movie, but I have seen the potato scene because my mom was making fun of me for playing with my mashed potatoes.
Yeah, that's a good one. Now, do you guys, the highest degree of representation called superrealism, do you guys all understand that? There's superrealism, there's hyperrealism, um, uh, superreal photography, all these kinds of things. There's actually a photographer from Eastern Europe that will go through and he'll take hundreds and hundreds of digital images of something, and then he'll print these huge photos that are maybe 8 feet tall and 15 feet long that have so much detail in them that you can see the toupee of the guy sitting in the car at the edge of the docks from 3 miles away. in this photo that he does. And it's just, so that's hyper real, super real photography. But yeah, anytime somebody really goes into incredible levels of detail in their realism or representation, it is called super realism. There's a painter called Ivan. Oh, I can't remember. I can't remember his name. It's Ivan something or another, but he does things. He painted a picture of Dorian Gray in a 1958 version of that story, and he will paint the lace in his paintings with brushes that he has made that have a single hair in them. Which I use a magnifying glass. I think, holy cow, that's dedication. Now, this is a good one. Representational or figurative forms are those that relate directly to the human body. What do you think? Brittany, you're absolutely right. It's anything that relates to reality. Now, when we're talking about figurative size, we're talking about size relative to the human body. But when we talk about representationalism or figurative forms, we're talking about anything that shares visual language with common experience. So when a tree looks like a tree or a dog looks like anybody else's dog, those are figural forms. Michelangelo's David is a good example of an idealized figure. Is anybody going to be willing to stick their neck out and say no? That is a beautiful example of Renaissance ultra real idealism. When human forms were depicted more perfect, and I'm using air quotes around that word, than they would exist in the real world. Now, this I think is really interesting. Which of these are not carved from the living rock? Can anybody tell me what the phrase living rock represents? What does it refer to?
I think I know. It's where it's carved into the actual rock instead of like a piece of rock being taken and then carved into all the way around. You could walk all the way around to the sculpture.
Yeah, that is really good. The living rock, it refers to something that is rooted in place. It's not separated out from where it naturally occurred and moved somewhere else. So the Shan Buddha is carved into a cliffside. So this cliff, if you look over here with these houses right there, it used to go all the way over to this side right here. But the Lashan Buddha, over a couple of generations, was carved directly into this. And so what we see is something that was never cut out and moved somewhere else. It looked like this is the treasury in Petra. I don't know if have any of you guys seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? This is the site that they used for where the Holy Grail was held. And if any of you guys are really interested in Ancient of Days kind of movies, the Seven Voyages of Sinbad, the great hall of Sinbad's buddy, who was an inventor, was filmed right here too. And then we look right here, Mount Rushmore. Any of you guys gone to Mount Rushmore? Have any of you guys seen the monument Crazy Horse that's just down the road?
I've been to both.
Okay, yeah, it's when I took my kids to see Mount Rushmore, and then the next day we went to Mount Crazy Horse, and when they saw Crazy Horse, they said, "Why did we bother going to Mount Rushmore?" Mount Rushmore, that huge structure, is not even as big as Crazy Horse's forehead. That is how giant that is. But both of those are, they were carved out of the mountainsides or the living rock. And then the Moai, all of these were blocks that were harvested from the volcanic mountains of Rapa Nui, and then carved at the base of where they were harvested, and then walked to these sites. And by walking, they would stand them upright and then have teams of about 50 to 100 people pulling in rhythm to move like one edge forward, then the other edge forward as the stone was rocking. So it took an incredible amount of collaboration and coordination to do that. And that is the only example. And of course, that is an example of liberated rock. So these other three are carved from the living rock where nothing was separated and moved. These very much were separated and moved. Now these static and dynamic forms, primary and secondary contours, interior and exterior forms, positive and negative forms, I just need a sentence or two for each of these. So well, there's four, let's have each of four different people tell us the difference between each of these. Who first wants to go? What is the difference between static and dynamic forms?
I was thinking that static form is kind of like a portrait, while a dynamic form is like a athlete in motion.
Yeah, and that is the difference. The stillness is the static form, and the movement or the motion is the dynamic form. So you're exactly right. When we looked at Henry Moore's reclining figures, those are all static. When we look at Boccioni's figure and form through space and time, that is somebody who's moving, caught in the moments of moving, and that is very dynamic. So yeah, there's a big difference, and you hit it on the head. All right, who wants to tell us about primary and secondary contours?
Can I say?
Sure.
Primary contours is the main form, a larger form, and the secondary contours are the ones that develop on top of that or within.
All right, excellent. A good example of that is when you look at the we watched a video talking about applying the tools of artistic critique, where people were talking about Henry Moore's reclining figure that was in the museum. The primary contour is the overall shape of that figure. The secondary contours were where those strings were embedded into the plaster. You guys remember that? All right, excellent. Who wants to tell us about interior and exterior forms?
I can. Um, the interior forms are the areas inside a piece that are hollow, or it's an illusion that they're hollow. And the exterior forms are the outside of the piece.
All right, excellent. Yeah, very good. And it's a relatively simple idea, but we're thinking about these words in the context of three-dimensional work or sculpture. So Brittany, that's an excellent answer. Now, either Erin or Rihanna, which of you want to tell us about positive and negative forms?
Is that like a... Sorry, I have a headache today, so I'm having trouble with the brain. But is that like positive and negative space, where positive is the actual thing and negative is the stuff implied in the emptiness around it?
Yeah, exactly. And that is perfect. Objects that reach out into space around it or reach into a hollow interior, I think are a lot more interesting because they engage the volume of space around them, and they build awareness of that negative space. So yeah, very, very good, Rihanna. You hit it right on the head. Okay, then here is the last question. Now, you guys, I know that you're going to deal with this if you haven't already dealt with it. Why is the subtraction process often slow and painstaking? There's three ways of constructing things in like a 3D design world. One is addition, like when you're working with clay, you add stuff on or you glue stuff together. Two is assemblage, where you have a lot of different parts that you reassemble. Like Louise Nevelson is an excellent example of this. She would find bits and bobs from a cabinetry workshop and put them together into these tremendous sculptures. And the third is subtraction. What happens in subtraction that is different than the other two?
Once the material is taken off, it's pretty well gone.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're working with something and you screw up with addition, when you're adding stuff on, you just add more on. If you're doing it with assemblage and something doesn't glue right and it falls off, you glue it back on. But if you are carving something, soap or foam or whatever, and a little bit extra breaks off, oh, the suck factor is extreme. So yes, definitely. And that is something that if you're not intimately aware of it now, as you work on the stuff that you're doing for this project, that's something to be aware of. Try really hard not to get discouraged or frustrated, because there are a lot of different ways you can fix it. But just be really aware of that. Now, people in this class have carved and had stuff break off. Easiest way to work that together is or to compensate for that, is to actually glue it with a glue like wood glue or Gorilla Glue. You don't want to use an epoxy because that will melt the foam. And when you glue it, you use a couple toothpicks to kind of stitch it in place. So you stab the toothpicks into the bigger form, and then you apply the glue on the smaller form you're sticking to it. And then when you stick it together, make sure that the toothpick stabs through the smaller form as well. And then it will really hold in place. You just have to be mindful of it when you're sanding so you don't see the seam after you do your paper mache. All right, does anybody have any questions on that quiz? All right, great. Now, last week we talked about the journey into abstraction, and we talked about organic or biomorphic abstraction. And hopefully most of you have been able to see most, if not all, of those videos of the background information. And I wanted to share with you just some examples. We're going to go through the stuff really kind of quick, and hopefully you don't know any of the people whose stuff we're looking at. And we're just going to look not at the quality of the photography. We're just going to look at the shapes, and I'll tell you why each one is successful in meeting the parameters of this carving. Okay? Is that all right with everybody? All right. This one I think is really good because you can see there are these organic forms, and they don't have any flat, hard edges. You have an edge here and an edge here, but they softened it a bit. Now, right here, this looks like it might be the surface of the foam. And so that I don't want to be able to see the flat surface of the foam anywhere. Okay, so there are some really good things about this one. Now, one thing that I like about this one is you have a lot of really interesting protrusions and very organic shapes and very interesting things. It has holes through here. On this, it looks like to me that the person could possibly sand it a little bit more, because you can see the tool marks here and here, and we can see a gouge right here. This kind of thing can be fixed with the paper mache, this kind of thing. But you want to sand this down so it's as smooth as you can get it. When you get to the point where the sandpaper starts tearing off chunks, like right through here, just stop, and you'll fill that in when you do the paper mache. This one, I think, has an interesting idea, but more needs to be done on this. And I'll show you right here. This is the flat surface of the foam block. I don't want to see that. I do like what they've done with carving out a section right here. I like how they've rounded things off. And you notice that this is going straight up and then it takes an angle this way. And I love that, how it's scooped out and it changes kind of a direction. But some of the things to be mindful of is like there's these big chunks here that need to be smoothed down a bit. And again, the areas of the surface of the foam block, that needs to be changed so that you don't see that flatness. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to curve around and sand it down so that it becomes a shallow curve. Another way to do that is to carve into it a little bit so it becomes like a shallow indent. Now this one I think starts off really interesting, but again, more needs to be done. And we can see like there's chunks taken out, but it's not smoothed out. See the flat portion of that surface of the foam? That needs to be gone. And the easiest way to do that would be to sand this over so that this all becomes curved from here to there. That would also help to alleviate this kind of flat plane that is wrapping around the whole thing. This area is a little bit better, or is a lot better than this area, because in this area you can see that they did a curve all the way through, but still this needs to be sanded down. Are you guys seeing some commonalities with what's going on? All of these are completely unique shapes, so that the form and shape itself is not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at how much carving has been done and how smooth the form is. Now there's some really good things I like about this. I like the hole there. I like the fact that this comes out kind of flat going this way, and then it looks like it's changing direction 90 degrees almost coming down this way. So it's flat horizontally, and then it's flat vertically right here. But, and I say that, I'm not saying that you can see the edge of the foam. You can't, because a person took the time to carve that all away. This edge might be a little bit problematic because it's a little bit sharp, but the way that they've sanded this so that it's all smooth, this is really well done. But it looks like they needed a little bit more sanding here, a little bit more sanding there to get that more taken care of. I think this is a really nicely done one because here I don't see any of that original flat form of the, except for maybe like right here and right here. So little dots here and there of that original foam block. So maybe that needs to be sanded a little bit there. But what I like is that they've carved just a little bit away here. So it's big, carved more here. You have holes here and here, scooped out a lot. There's all these different planes and levels or of where how much they carved out. And it goes in different directions. I like that. Okay. This I think is really interesting. I'm liking how where this is going. I think that this is a really intriguing shape because yeah, it looks almost like an 8, but this is very difficult to carve all the way through there and not have something connecting each side. Another thing that you'll see is that even though this is all in the same plane, it pulls away from us right here, so it dips away. So what you're having is, if you looked at it from the top, you would see a form that is pretty much even over here, but this side takes an angular direction away from the viewer. And so I like that for a couple reasons. What I would like to see on this one is that it needs to be sanded more, so it's a lot more round.
Does anyone else kind of want to eat this one?
It looks kind of like a cool pretzel or funky donut. Now this one, I think this has a really interesting silhouette, but what's wrong with this one? Why doesn't it not work?
Flat.
Yes, It is completely flat. All it is you have a silhouette cut out and that's it. The way to fix that would be probably to carve at least maybe one side or the other away from this and smooth this around so it looks almost like a fin, and maybe to smooth this quite a bit in different layers. Maybe this is more of like a flat fin that goes horizontal like this, and maybe this is almost could be like a fist or a set of fingers or something like that. But yeah, this surface is way too flat and it does not invite any of that biomorphic curvature that we've been seeing in other good examples. I think this is another pretty good example of one. And you can see how all the sides are sanded, and this is really pretty smooth. It looks like it's heavier and thicker through here and a lot narrower right through here. So you have some really interesting changes. The only thing that would make this even more interesting is what if you carved the backside of this form away and the front side down here, so it looked like this was leaning towards you, and then they did the opposite of this, leaving this in place and carving this away so it looked like it was leaning away from you and it almost felt like it was corkscrewing. That would really be fantastic. This one I think is really interesting and a great start. And I love that the way that they photograph this. Now I'm going to change, I'm going to look, see if we can find another view really quick. This is really a fascinating kind of thing. And what I like about it is the way that it corkscrews and twists and turns around. What I would like them to do is to sand it so it's smoother, essentially. Maybe sand this out so it's a little bit smoother through here or better defined through there and is smoother over these areas and not so flat right there. But I think this is a really fun one. This is a really simple shape, but it's fun and it's going in a good direction. The only thing that I would like here is if the person maybe hollowed this out a little bit more and smoothed everything around more. And I think that would make it look really good. I really like this form. I think this is kind of fun. For this one, I think these areas right through here should be more smooth because this looks really jagged. And I think that this could stand to be smoothed a little bit more. To make this more interesting, it might be interesting to maybe cut out some of this on the side facing us and cut away stuff on the side facing away from us over here so that when you turn it around, it kind of looks like it's leaning or wiggling a little. This one is really a fascinating one. And on this one, you can see that flat surface right through here that we don't want. So if this person rounded this, sanded that out so you didn't have those cutouts, I think this would be a really fascinating one and work out really well. So again, we have a problem with that flat surface that is untouched, and we need to smooth that out and round it.
If I had a mini water-safe version of that last one, my fish would love it.
Yeah, it definitely looks like something that should belong in a fish tank. Yeah. What are the issues with this one?
It looks kind of rough.
Yeah, and I think that is the big long.
I think it kind of looked like a cabbage to me.
It looks what?
It looked like a cabbage to me.
A cabbage? Well, I think that is a really interesting observation because it does have some of that kind of flow to it and feel to it. As far as wrongness or more work needing to be done, I think Brittany is right. It does look really rough. It just needs to be sanded down. And if it looks too much like cabbage or it looks too much like something that is in the real world, maybe as the person is sanding it, maybe these channels right here could be extended down this way. Or maybe this area should be hollowed out a little bit more, or other things done to that. Because as you're working on this, if it looks too recognizable to you, feel free to play with it and do different things with it. Because nobody is judging how close you get to what your original idea was. I think this is a really fun one. Again, a little bit more sanding right through here, but I really like where this is because you can't see any of that flat surface anywhere. And it's just really fascinating to me.
This looks like the kind of marble sculpture they put in like fancy offices.
Oh yeah,
I mean that in
absolutely.
a good way.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It has that very much mid-century abstract feel to it. So yeah, I think you're right. And this is another one that I think could be really cool if they sanded this down and curved it around. This is another example of somebody just carving out a silhouette. And it's interesting from this side, but it's not really interesting from any other side. So you could start with this and then turn it 90 degrees and carve that, so that makes an interesting silhouette, and then turn it around and file and sand it down to kind of blend the two sides together and see what you come up with. I think this is another great example of a good start. I think all this one needed is sanding, right through there. It still looks kind of chunky and carved kind of brutally. So I think sanding this out, making this transition a little bit smoother between this lobe and that lobe and these two shapes and this shape, and then right around here, maybe making this feel more like a smooth ring would work really well. Now I do have some more photos, but I'm thinking that rather than talk about each one, I'm just going to go through, and if there's one that I see that there's a problem with, then I'll stop and we'll talk about that. All right?
Only problems and negativity here, of course.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I'm showing you all the students that did this after I told them what was going on. They made the changes and their stuff looks fantastic. So otherwise, I feel kind of bad. I love this because of these knobs, and the knobs come out in different directions. So I'll say either one good thing or one bad thing. Rihanna, that's a good observation. I really like how smooth this one is. It reminds me of like a scrimshaw cat that has been handed down for generations. I really like the forms on this one. This just needs to be smoothed a bit. This is a great silhouette and form. It just needs to be smoothed more. I think this is a really great example. It has these three nodes and this kind of spud nut like donut form, but this one is well smoothed and looks very biomorphic and organic. I really like how this feels like a spiral. The only thing that this needs is a little bit more smoothing so we can get rid of some of those edges. This is a really fun one. Where it does have a couple breaks and the person did glue it together. I think this is probably a little bit more complicated than most of you would want to deal with at this stage, and I'd recommend not going this far. I think the only issue that I have with this one, because the forms and everything are so cool, is it just needs to be smoothed out, like through here, so that it looks more flowing and organic. I really like this one. I think that this is a super fun shape. The only thing this needs, like right through here, it's really nicely smooth. Just needs more smoothing right through here and right along the top. This is a fun one. This, I think, also belongs in somebody's office. And the only thing that I would think about this one is that I think it needs a little bit more smoothing.
I
And a
think I
little bit
fought
of
one of
rounding.
these in Mario.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I really like this one too. I like that spiral shape. The only thing this needs is areas like this and right through here and right through here need to be smoothed some more. Right through here is really nicely smoothed. Right up here on the left is really nicely smoothed. This is really nicely done. It has a very nice organic biomorphic form and it smooths really well. I don't know how they got that smooth.
That looks like a 3D rendered digital object.
Yeah, it does. The reason I know it's not is because of other things and actually watching her hold it. But it does look digitally rendered. I think this, I really love the forms in this. This just needs to be smoothed and rounded more. I think this is a great silhouette. On this, I think that it would be great to like scoop out a lot of this on either side and then smooth and round these forms with the sandpaper until maybe some of them are circular like balls and maybe some of them are more like fins or like cactus lobes or things, something like that. I think that would be really interesting. I really think that this is a terrific form. Now these are just like scratches. So this person could smooth this a little bit more if they wanted to. And this right here, it looks like it is the surface of the foam, and I think it is down here. But right up here, it's actually curving away. And I don't know how they got it to look that smooth, but I think that this just needs to be curved more through here, and these scratches sanded out like it is right through here. But I love that form. I think this is a great form too. And the only thing that I'm thinking about with this one is that it is a little bit too silhouette-y and maybe some more smoothing where maybe this side is sanded down quite a bit more so it's shallower, and on the far side of this it's sanded down more. But I think, and maybe changing the silhouette of this by smoothing and sanding it might make it really might make it better. But I think that this is a really
In a
good.
good way.
What's that?
It's giving Lucky Charms.
Yeah, yeah, it does look like one of those forms. That was actually the first thing I thought of when I saw it the first time. This, I think, is a really incredible form. I love this, but it terrifies me because I can just imagine it breaking right there. On this one, the only thing that I think it needs is more sanding. This is really fascinating. I love the way that they've played with that surface. So this is carved and curved away from us. The only thing that this needs now is just sanding. And the person could sand this by taking the sandpaper and getting a strip of it, wrapping it around their finger, and then just carefully going around this area and sanding it down so you don't have that sharp edge. And maybe sanding this area right there so it doesn't look like it's cut roughly out. But these areas right here and along the left there are really nicely done.
Game console controller for aliens.
Oh, is that what it is? Wouldn't surprise
The
me.
last one May was making me think game console for aliens.
Yeah, totally. This one, I like this one. It makes me think of a melting marshmallow man dancing. And I really enjoy this one. The only thing that I think
Also
this would
belongs
need,
in an office.
yes, definitely. Maybe this area smoothed just a bit. Maybe this sanded a little bit, but this is really nicely done. Now this one, I think this is a really excellent start. For this one to feel done though, you can see how chunky it is. This needs to be sanded. And I would say even sanded so it's scooped out almost like a dish through here. And then smooth this so it is a more prominent node coming out. And I think that would make it really fantastic. Now, I think this form is a really, really cool form. Now you look at this and there's lots of chunks missing and stuff right through here. This is sanded actually pretty nicely. And so things like this, the little hollow bumps and stuff like that, don't freak out about that because when you put the paper mache on it, you'll fill in a lot of those things. What I'm looking for is the overall curves. Like right through here, maybe needs to be sanded down a little bit because it's an indentation like that. But I think for the most part, this, and it feels very much like, you know, folding flesh and very organic and biomorphic. I really like this form. I think there's a couple areas that feel a little bit chunky to me, like right through here, maybe a little bit sharp, but a little bit more sanding on this, and it would be just right. I really like that form. I think this is a fun one too. The only thing that concerns me a little bit is this is flat right along here, and that's the surface of the foam. So this person may be sanding so that if you look down at it, that you can see this undulate a little bit instead of being totally flat, I think would be good. And maybe a little bit more careful sanding of these things to make them a little bit smoother. But having all these protrusions just kind of freaks me out a bit because I can just see it breaking. And when this person got done sanding it and did the paper mache, it actually did not break. They were able to keep it. But just worrying about it would give me a massive headache. This is a really interesting start. And I kind of like this kind of smooth and just subtle variation. But this is the part that kind of draws me away from that because this is the surface of the foam. And you can see this hard edge right along here that they did not smooth. So on this one, I would recommend that they smooth the edges quite a bit, get rid of this area, maybe even hollow out this more, a little bit more, and get rid of these sharper edges. But this is
a manta ray themed donut.
Yes, very much so. It looks like it should be filled with like raspberry or Bavarian cream filling. I think this is a really good one too. Subtle forms, but you can see it. This is another one where they did a really good job of smoothing it out. And I love how the shapes just keep doing things that you don't quite expect. Like right through here, I would expect this to be completely smooth, and they have this little fold sticking up. I think stuff like that is just really interesting. So this is subtle. It belongs in somebody's office building. This is another one where the form itself is really, really cool, but this just needs some sanding. And I think that, you know, to smooth the things out, maybe make this more prominently round, maybe make this more, a little bit more bulbous and cutting away a little bit more here, but mostly it just needs to be sanded.
Mysteriously cute.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of an abstracted Pikachu something. No, Pokemon thing. That's it. And I really like this one. It makes me think of a mutated Snoopy. But the only thing that's needed on this one is sanding and smoothing right through here, I think. I think these are really good forms. It might be interesting to scoop a little bit out here and there so it goes against what you expect. This just needs to be sanded. This is really fascinating and I love the shape, but again, this needs to be sanded quite a bit. I think this is a great form. This reminds me of like a cactus of some sort. It just needs like areas right through here, right through here, right through here. It just needs to be sanded a little bit, I think. And this otherwise looks pretty good.
It's kind of boogieing.
Oh, like from Nightmare Before Christmas?
Well, it's just like it's grooving, like it's dancing.
Oh, like it's dancing. Yeah, like a dancing cactus. This one reminds me quite a bit of one of the artists from this module. And I don't know entirely how I feel about this because it makes me think of, let's see, I'll find his work.
The shadow in the middle kind of looks like an eye that is like an inverted eye that's looking at us.
Like right here?
Yeah. Like the black part would be the whites and the white part would be the pupil.
Okay, the artist that I'm thinking of is Brancusi. I think this is a little bit too much like Brancusi for my comfort level. Let's see if I can find an image. It just makes me think a little bit of something like this. So it's obviously not a copy, and I think it's an interesting direction that the person went. I do love the form though. I think it's really great. The only thing that this needs is some of these areas need to be sanded more. But it definitely has a feel of some sort of weird knuckle bone or something.
I think they sit on these in Star Wars.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. This one I think is a good start, but again, it needs to be sanded and smoothed and rounded quite a bit because this still is too much that original block and just one side is cut out or one face is cut
Imagine,
out.
like if this was a chair, imagine going kind of in the corner of it in the middle and making another hole that connects with that one.
I think
on the
that would be
side.
really interesting. Yeah, I think that would be good. And it would also be nice to maybe cut off some of this surface on this side and some of this surface on that side or something. I think that it could be really interesting. And this one makes me think of like an ode to broccoli or something. I really like the way that they've done this form and it looks pretty smooth. I think it just needs a little bit more sanding right through here and right through here. But I think this is a really fun form. This is a really great start, but again, it needs to be sanded and it needs to have more done to like this surface or the far surface and the far surface so that it really activates the volume around it. We want, one of the things to consider on this is we don't want anybody to look at it and get the whole idea from one perspective. We want people to be interested in turning this around. This makes me think of a big tadpole. And I like what they're starting to do here, where this looks like it's almost rippling. This needs to be more sanded and more smooth. And I think that this person could really work on that by maybe sanding and smoothing this down more so that this has more of an undulating ripple through it. I think that could be really interesting. This is a really interesting shape to start. It reminds me of a crawler. On this, I would recommend sanding it so that these become more like fleshy flanges as opposed to just carving in like this. This doesn't look finished to me, and it doesn't fit that kind of feel that we're going through for. With more sanding, a little bit more attention to that kind of a detail, this could look like some sort of weird succulent plant with those kind of fleshy protruding leaf structures. So I think that the form is really interesting. I really love this shape. I think it's a terrific shape. The only thing that makes me think, maybe a little bit more smoothing around here where the transition is, but I love how this shape is. Maybe a little bit more sanding right through here, but I think this is a really good form. I think this is a great start, but you can see that untouched surface of the foam block. I think on this one, sanding it so that this surface undulates as well as the edge would be really nice. And this is one of the things to stay away from. You can see if we just stood there, the person traced an outline and cut it out, and that's all they did, and then kind of sanded the edges a little bit. One good way to start this carving is to start doing that, then turn it 90 degrees so you're looking at this face, draw a shape and cut that out, that silhouette, and then look at the top coming down and do the same thing. And if you do that on 3 sides, so you cut a silhouette out on each of 3 different faces, you're going to be getting an amalgam form that is not simply a silhouette. And then you can start sanding and connecting the forms through sanding and making it smooth. This is another good example of starting with the silhouette, but I think it would be so much more cool if they looked at the top of it and maybe made this undulate a little bit, sanding it so we don't have any of that flat surface like on the original block, and making it feel like it's swimming, that it has some movement to it like that.
This is a creature.
It reminds me of a scared cat.
Or like a lizard that's yelling.
A yelling lizard, that's a good one. This is a really fun form. I like this. The only thing that I would say about this one is they need to sand it just a bit, make it more smooth. And if they can't sand that down, if it would make it too much, you can pack it with the paper mache. Now the biggest problem with this submission is that you can see the person's hand. You don't want to do that. When you photograph this, you want to photograph it so that your fingers aren't in the picture anywhere. And so far, a lot of you, or almost everybody, has been doing a really good job with their first photos. And the ones that needed to go back and redo it have redone it with great photos. Now this one very much obviously that's the original outside edge of the foam. So this really needs to be sanded. And this is something where the person could sand a lot more away through here, maybe make this narrower, and maybe make this a little bit more shallow. But all of that original surface needs to be sanded or cut away. But I do like where they're going with this form.
It had like a disgruntled energy.
This one?
Yeah.
I think this would also look really good if it was made out of cement and maybe being 6 feet tall. I think that would look pretty cool. I like the form. And maybe that would be an interesting way of approaching this assignment is to imagine what it would look like if this thing was super big. This is another example of one where they're starting off and you're just seeing the initial silhouette. This needs to be sanded quite a bit with maybe rings cut into it a little bit and those kinds of forms, maybe cutting into it, connecting this and that, and maybe this area and that area, maybe making this a smooth ring right through here, and maybe trimming this down so it's really narrow. I don't know, but more needs to be done so that this feels like it's addressed on all three sides rather than just a silhouette with a little bit of carving to get rid of the edge, because this needs to be sanded quite a bit to give it that organic biomorphic feel. I think this is a terrific shape. It looks to me like a giant's pacifier, but this does need to be sanded quite a bit so we can get rid of some of these harder edges. Oh, and this, I will get messages like this every once in a while. One thing that is nice, especially if you take a photo on your phone, you can always email the photo to yourself and then choose the resolution size. It's good to keep your resolution down to under 1.5 megs when you submit. I really like this form. I think it's terrific. It very much does that idea where it addresses 3 dimensions. It feels like it's leaning as well. The only thing that I would recommend on this one is sanding and smoothing it down preparatory to paper mache. I think this is a great form. I think it would look even better if it was standing like on this end, and this just needs to be sanded a little bit. I think, and then it would be perfect.
Space furniture.
Space furniture, yes. All right, do you guys have any questions? Does this feel a lot more clear to you about what kind of thing we're looking for? Okay. And if we need to work on it a little bit longer, then that's totally fine too. But what we're going to be doing with this form, and this is very important to remember, is after carving it, after sanding it, getting it ready to go, then we're going to go back to it and cover it with paper mache, sand it down, and do 2 coats of paper mache, sanding after each coat so that it's pretty smooth. And then the final thing that you're going to do at the end of the term is go through it and apply different colors of paint as well as textures out the wazoo. And I will show some images of that later on too. So this, we're going to be visiting this biomorphic carving 2 more times before the end of the semester. Now, there's different things that we need to do in between those things, and before you do the paper mache, please make sure that I have looked at this and made any comments about it, because I don't want you to have to rework anything. If it needs more sanding, sand it more. If it needs to be pulled away from just a silhouette cutout, do that before you apply the paper mache. But make sure you get this so that it feels really good as an organic biomorphic abstract shape or form. All right? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right, well, I thought that would take a lot longer than it did. I'm really pleased that we went through so fast and looked at that.
Sorry, quick question. Will you be reviewing our carving next class?
Yeah, whatever is turned in, I'll be doing that. And I wanted to go to one more thing on this assignment. Like, for the most part, the discussions that you guys have are for you to just put up your images so you can draw from them for your critique application videos. But on this one, it's a little bit different. This one, you're going to actually be responding. And let me show you this. So for this module, after you turn in your carving, you're going to submit it as well to the discussion. And then you're going to come back and critique briefly other people's work. Now remember, critique does not mean criticize. Do you remember what the tools of artistic critique are? There's 4 tools. Do you guys remember what those 4 tools are? D, A, I, E. What's the D? What's the first one?
Describe.
Describe,
Jinx.
right. And you be specific when you describe. You're as specific as you can. Be precise. What's the A?
Analyze.
Analyze. Excellent. And that's where you talk about how the artist may have done it. You know, what are the techniques they used, and potentially even why did they choose to use one technique over another? What's the third one for I?
Interpret.
Yes, where you're guessing at the artist's worldview, maybe what the symbolism might be. If it looks like it was intended to look very stationary and calm, that's going to mean one thing. If it looks like it's twisting around and moving, maybe that means something else. Yes. And then what's the last step, the E?
Evaluate.
Evaluate. Excellent. So for this discussion, there's going to be 2 things that you're going to do. First, you're going to upload your image on there. And then after you upload your image, you're going to make a comment on 3 other people's work. So, and it usually I give a couple days to do this, but nobody ever, I'm not going to say nobody, maybe 3 or 4 people out of the whole class will put their things up on the discussion on the first day. So you will have a few days to do this, but put your stuff up as soon as you can, and then go to other people, and you're going to make a comment on each of 3 other people's works. There's going to be 40, the comment's going to be 40 words. You're not going to have to go through each of the 4 steps of artistic critique, but in those 40 words, and I would recommend doing this in 3 sentences, you're going to do 1 sentence, how did they involve the viewer? Second sentence, how did they develop interesting or engaging shapes? And you're going to be specific. I like these shapes. This was really intriguing. That form was very interesting. And then your third observation is, what principle can you pick out that we discussed regarding biomorphic abstraction? And on that, and on this, I'm really fluid. You may be looking at something, and you may say, this is an intriguing shape, intriguing network of forms, and it involved me because I'm constantly wondering what is on the other side of the photo that I can't see from this side. I think that the shapes are really interesting and engaging to me because they don't do what I expect. Like I expect an area there to just continue as a ball or a nodule, and it turns into something that almost looks like the edge of a leaf. And I think that's really fascinating. And then I can really tell how this is informed by things I see every day. Like maybe this is a thick part of a blade of grass. Maybe it's a knuckle bone. It looks like a shoulder bone or something that my dog was chewing on. But it's intriguing to me because I can almost identify the shape that was used to inspire the artist. And basically that's what the comment is. And just making sure about 3 sentences at least and 40 words is what you need to do. And you do that on each of how many other people's work? 3, right. Excellent. So that's what we're looking for. So this discussion, you're going to submit your images, and then after other people have submitted their images, you're going to find 3 other people and make a 40-word comment following these criteria on each of 3 fellow students. All right, does everybody get this? Okay, excellent. Yeah, we will definitely be going over this next week. And I believe after this, after you're done with this carved biomorphic abstraction and do those things, we are going to start talking about texture and light. which, you know, texture is pretty obvious when it comes to sculpture and stuff like that. But light, there aren't an awful lot of sculptures that you can think of readily where people did a lot of painting on them. During the Renaissance, a really cool thing that everybody had to have in their garden was a rescued Greek or Roman piece of statuary. And workers, as they were finding this in Italy and Sicily and wherever they could, they'd pull it up, and the original paint, you know, after 1,000 years in the dirt, would be bubbly and gross and disgusting. So the workers would actually scrape all that paint off. But of course, the people living in their houses, you know, away from chamber pots and gutter sewage, never saw what the workmen were actually doing. And so you have Renaissance era art critics that would talk about the purity of white marble, you know, and say, you know, using that as emblematic of how pure the Roman and Greek sculptors were. But we know that that's a bunch of garbage. Severius Septimus, who was the founder of London, 3rd century Roman emperor, was born in Libya, and his wife is from Syria. So, and he was a black-skinned African. He and his wife were both. But seeing his sculptures around London that are now almost 2,000 years old, nobody thought that for a moment until about 35, 40 years ago. People started doing microscopic tests on. They originally were looking at it to see how much smoke damage there was, you know, from the Industrial Revolution and from just overall exhaust from cars. And they realized that there was paint, you know, microscopic flakes of paint on these sculptures, and it showed Severus Septimus's actual skin tone color. And with more research, they found that our ancestors that we think of now creating these, you know, just unblemished white marble sculptures, they did that so they would have a beautiful surface on which to paint. And they would do a lot of texture, visual texture with their paint. And we'll talk more about that. But that's something that we don't think about, because when workers would find that, scrape the paint off, for centuries, everybody assumed that's how the Etruscans, the Greeks, and the Romans left their stuff, as white and unencumbered by any sort of pigment. And that simply was not the case. So we'll talk more about that, but it does give kind of an interesting layer of involvement for the stuff that we do, working with things like color and then physical texture as well. So we'll talk more about that. Any last comments or observations as we wind up today? All right. I hope everybody has a wonderful week and weekend. When is spring break?
It's March 10th through the 14th.
Okay. Let's see. I'm sorry. I got something in my eye that I'm trying to deal with. We are still going to meet that week. And if you guys are on vacation, what I hope people show up for the meeting. We're still going to do it that week, but I really hope that nobody does anything obnoxiously stupid during spring break. It's notorious. And it's interesting to me that I have never met somebody who is a functioning professional going to UVU, who is a good solid student, who goes wild and crazy and winds up in jail over spring break. So don't do that, please. Nobody do anything stupid. Enjoy yourself, have fun, and do everything you can to remember all the lessons Grandma taught you. Please. Because you know, once it's on the internet, it's on there forever. That should be enough of an incentive. All right, guys. I hope you have a great week and weekend. I look forward to seeing what you guys are doing with these carvings, and we'll talk more next week. All right. Thank you, guys. Good night. We'll see y'all.
I did just remember one thing